As a world-class teacher and researcher, I will continue to speak out against the murderous work of governments worldwide. No more murderous than the practice of politicians using government, psychiatry and police. Here we have a report, another piece, a significant piece of damning evidence against Australian politicians and their government workers. Mortality, meaning death, people using psychiatric services and drug company drugs. They call it mental health services and prescription medications, but it is the correct practice is government psychiatric practice. It's published in the Australian Bureau of Statistics, analysis of 2011 data, and it was published on the 8th of September 2017, just last year. We go specifically to pages 5 and 6 of the report, and they do an analysis of the death data, how many people they killed in this period. You can see I've highlighted some of the data, and I have already uploaded this report on Facebook, but I will be uploading these pages and also making a Facebook page to jail people who promote government psychiatric killing. This report covers, this analysis covers a 13.5 month period, specifically from the 10th of August 2011 to the 27th of September 2012. Of all deaths in the period, of this period in Australia, 153,451 deaths registered in Australia in that period, 13.5 month period. They killed, under the psychiatric system, 49.4% of all deaths in this period, being 75,858 deaths. This is an active, violent, political government stealing, torture and killing machine that has been practiced in Australia over the past 100 years. If we extrapolate this data, which covered a 13.5 month period, 49.4% of all deaths in this period being 75,858 deaths. If we extrapolate and apply that to the past 100 years, Australia's politicians, federal and state, and their government workers have killed in excess of 1 million Australian citizens using psychiatry and the police. This is the government's own published death data in this 13.5 month period in Australia. If you look at the research worldwide, the medical research worldwide, you'll see that psychiatric drugs kill humans. They kill the respiratory system, they kill the cardiovascular system, they kill tissue, muscle, organs, they kill human life. There's a whole list of medical problems that they cause, and I'll be going through that in the description of the video. In particular, psychiatric drugs cause a QT prolongation effect. A QT interval is part of the cycle of a heartbeat. A prolongation of the QT interval increases the risk of sudden death from abnormal heartbeats, and in this case the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Association in Australia, said it can lead to a life-threatening tachycardia, which is increased heart rate. So the death analysis that they say they died from this disease and that disease, well, it's plain in the medical research that psychiatric drugs kill humans, and all their other violent practices as well that they use. They can't kill the public without using the police as well, so that's all written into the state psychiatric laws, that they use the police, just doing exactly what the Nazis did. Looking a bit closer at some of this death data, of the 75,858 Australian citizens they killed in this period, it represents 11.4 deaths per 1,000 that they drug. It also represents 6.1 deaths per 1,000 in the population. They killed 40,401 women in this period, being 53.3% of the deaths, total deaths, and they killed 35,457 men in this period, 46.7% of the deaths in this period. they were drugging, they admit that they were drugging 3.2 million Australian citizens in this 13.5-month period, and that 3.4 million people were under the government psychiatric system. So between 3.2 and 3.4 million Australian citizens they drugged in this period. Again, if we extrapolate and apply that to the past more than 100 years that they've been killing citizens with government psychiatry, they have literally drugged hundreds of millions of Australian citizens under the government psychiatric system. Also, looking at analysis of this death data, 26,375 that they killed were aged between 15 and 74 years, being 34.8% of deaths, and 65.2% of deaths were people under the age of 15 and over the age of 75. So they're always targeting the vulnerable people, elderly people, children, women, homeless people. They drug thousands in the government facilities, in prisons and psychiatric facilities. Homeless people they drug anybody that's vulnerable to get into their net. This practice must be abolished. It must be abolished in Australia, and we need to publicly fight to have the political people and their government workers jailed for practicing this, killing citizens with government psychiatry, and also people in the public who actively promote it as well should be jailed, because they are encouraging the government to torture and kill citizens with this disgusting violent practice. And they also steal from their victims through the public trust. This is a $60 billion a year government stealing, torture, killing machine in Australia. And the people making the money are the workers who are doing the killing, and also the big pharmaceutical companies who are making billions of dollars out of government drugging in Australia and also worldwide. They've been doing it for over 200 years throughout the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar annual drugging system worldwide, and it results, clearly, the government's own death figures, it results in the death of Australian citizens. In fact, almost half of the people that die in Australia are being killed under the government psychiatric system, and that's in their own Australian Bureau of Statistics reported death figures, which anyone in the public can look at the deaths. If you want a question about how these people die, well, just remember that they're dead. And this is just a 13.5-month period. Some of the older psychiatric facilities that I could find are over 100 years old. There's still a few operating that are over 100 years old. It's actually government genocide. It's government genocide. The government people who are profiting off their torture killing machine, this is how they keep political and government power in Australia. They're actually replacing the population, what I call replacement genocide. In fact, the correct term for it is democide, replacement democide. It's a term revived and redefined by the political scientist R.J. Rummel as the murder of any person or people by their government, including genocide, politicide and mass murder. And they profit through economically profit and with political power. Politicians, judges, magistrates, police, all senior government involved, of course the psychiatric staff profiting, all the prison management, fines enforcement management, public trust. They steal from their victims through the public trust while they're killing their victims with psychiatric injections and other violent psychiatric practices. They've stolen billions of dollars from their dead victims through the public trust, and they're also defrauding the Commonwealth of their victims' pensions as well, because they get the pensions sent to the public trust, and they steal the pension and they give the victim a fraction of the pension while they're drugging them to death, while they're injecting them month after month and giving them oral drugs, all by force in the legislation. And that's why in the legislation they use the police as well, because they can't enforce this. They're doing exactly what the Nazis did. They can only enforce it by using the police. The people who are enforcing this practice, the way to solve this problem is to abolish the practice, and the way to prove once and for all that they are killing the public is if we round up all the politicians in Australia who enforce it, which is pretty much all of them, that's federal and state, round up all their government workers involved, including judges and magistrates and police who are enforcing it, and all other people in the public who actively promote it and promote this government killing machine. If we rounded up all those people and put them in a big room, and then we rounded up all of their psychiatric drugs and injections, if we rounded up all their psychiatric drugs in Australia and we injected those political and government people and citizens in the public who promote it, if we injected them, they'd all be dead in a week. If we injected them with their own chemicals, if we injected them with their own psychiatric chemical compounds, they would all be dead in a week, to prove that they are actively killing the public. So rather than allow them to forcibly drug 3.4 million Australians, the public needs to turn around and demand these people be jailed and that this practice needs to be abolished. As I said, if they were forced in a room and the public injected them with their own psychiatric chemical compounds, their own psychiatric poisons, all of those political and government people would be dead in a week. They are murderous practices, they are murderous injections, they do result in the death of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people over a period of time, in fact in excess of 1 million people over the past century to today. And that is it's not just the government death data that's published that proves it. In the table, for example, it's not just the government death data that proves it. It's the millions of testimonies of the living relatives and victims, relatives and friends throughout Australia who can testify that the government is torturing and killing their relatives and friends and neighbours. The public is also guilty as well. The public is guilty for allowing this to go on and failing to speak out about it, just as the public is guilty for the government killing the Aboriginal people over the past 230 years to today. The public did not stop those politicians and their government workers' democide towards the Aboriginal people, which continues. They've pretty much wiped them out. 20 years ago, you'd see Aboriginal people walking around and sitting around in the cities and the towns, and they're not there anymore. They have been democided, systematically hunted down and wiped out. And you'll find that most of the people that the government kills under their psychiatric system using the psychiatric and the police, most of the people that they've killed are Aboriginal Australians and Australians of European descent. They are using this practice to replace the population in a systematic democide towards the Australian people. And it's a clear systematic killing machine as part of their Agenda 21 program, Globalisation, New World Order, that they are actively killing off the Australian-born people and replacing the population with foreigners to work for them and vote for them. So this is very much a part of their systematic Agenda 21 system and their depopulation system. Some people use the term depopulation. And their Globalisation, New World Order system, where they actively use strategies to kill, torture and steal from the public. There are a huge range of other strategies that they use, but this is a significant one. And here we have the death data in the government's own published report to prove it, in addition to all the millions of citizens across the country who could testify that they know people. Everybody knows somebody that has died in a prison or a psychiatric facility or an aged care facility, drugging the elderly people to death. Everybody knows someone or knows of someone who has died in a government facility, and that is very damning evidence as well against these primarily Liberal, Labor, Greens, national politicians, but also the other political people, One Nation, Nick Xenophon, and Cory Bernardi is not speaking out against this government torture killing machine. Most of the other political groups aren't. There are a few people, myself, there's Glenn Floyd, who's another federal Senate candidate in Victoria, speaking out about the government's psychiatric killing. And you'll find worldwide that they do tend to kill people who speak out about it. We know worldwide that there are natural therapy doctors who the government has killed because they've spoken out about psychiatric practice and other killing strategies used by governments worldwide. So we know that governments do kill highly educated and intelligent people. Well, they might call them whistleblowers, but they still kill people who speak out against the government's violence towards the public. Also, the corporate media is very guilty of this 100+ year killing machine going on in Australia. They've been promoting the same murderous political people in Australia, primarily Liberal, Labor, Greens and Nationals. They should be jailed for that as well, the corporate media people. I'm going to make another video about that. You may think that this is a lot of people involved, but really it's about 5% of the population who are involved in actively enforcing their psychiatric torture killing machine, as evidenced by the death data. That is the politicians, the government workers involved, the corporate media people involved, which is still a small group of people, and anybody in the public, citizens who actively promote the torture and killing of citizens in Australia using the police and the psychiatry. Well, the public is guilty because the public hasn't fought against it. In the same way, the public did not stop the government's democide towards the Aboriginal people, and now the public is still the target of these murderous politicians. And really, the only way you need to fight to get rid of them, either at the ballot or somehow physically remove them. In some way, the public complains that they don't have weapons. Well, the public does have a weapon. The government has weapons, the public has weapons. They have vehicles, trucks and buses and cars, which the public can use to defend themselves against tyrannical, murderous governments in Australia and worldwide. So they need to mobilise themselves and form a resistance. Like during the Nazi times, the public formed groups of resistance and they defended themselves and they tried to survive. Well, if we see that they've killed over 1 million citizens in the past 100 years simply by using the police and the government psychiatry, and that's a reason for the public to use any methods possible to protect themselves and defend themselves against the murderous, stealing, raping, torturing, tyrannical government. And a final note, the government in Australia is also, that's the politicians and their government workers and satanic people in the public who support their murderous work, have also been killing Christians with this psychiatric practice and using the police. When Christians are being locked up and drugged, they talk about God and Jesus, and the government just injects them even more and kills them. So they are actively killing Christians in Australia. They have been actively killing Christians in Australia for over 100 years using the government's psychiatry and the police and other government workers.
Taking over. If you left the party now, then no one would notice. But when we step up in the club, it just gets explosive. Representing London town, this is how we get down. Pretend you ain't a freak, now repeat after me. Gotta shout it from the rooftops and let everybody know. You're either with us or you're against us, 'cause the with me and I'll show you heaven. We'll take this to another level. But right now you gotta make a decision. Are you with us or are you against us?
Let's go. Now J-Mo gonna drop it when it's hot, when I come too hard. And everybody knows that I'm a superstar. It's like I'm in the mood to take over the bar. Pop champagne just like a movie star. Everybody in the club, put 'em up in the air. Clap your hands and move to the rhythm. Everybody say they love the bass and the jam. But this beat is sick, so who you kidding?